Yo.
A 56-year-old man just walked onto a stage, his first solo concert in 6 years, looked out at the crowd, and decided tonight was the night he was going to remind everybody why they used to fear him. And here's the wild part. In doing so, he literally proved every single thing Drake said about him on that album.
Every
Single
thing.
Because while he was standing up there flexing about billions and casually admitting to a stabbing he spent decades denying, somebody in the crowd was pulling up the GQ interview for March. The one where Sean Carter, Aubrey Drake Graham's self-appointed elder statesman, sat back in his chair and told the world that rap beef was beneath him, that the culture had outgrown it, that bringing people's kids into it was disgusting. And then, not 2 months later, he dragged Nicki Minaj's kid onto a Philadelphia stage.
So yeah,
the jig is up. And not in the way HOV meant it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Here's the factual rundown so we're all on the same page. Aubrey Drake Graham, Drizzy himself, dropped his 9th solo studio album ICEMAN on May 15, 2026, alongside 2 companion projects, Habibti and Maid of Honor, in a surprise triple album release that immediately broke records across the Billboard 200 and Hot 100. Across those projects, Drake took aim at Jay-Z on at least 3 separate tracks, Janice SDFU, Whisper My Name, and Make Them Pay, calling out the OG guard for coasting on name recognition, dismissing the value of a dinner with HOV, and accusing these veteran artists of running to Jay for a second opinion instead of standing on their own. That was May 15th. Fast forward 2 weeks. On May 30th, 2026, at the Roots Picnic in Philadelphia, his first proper solo concert in 6 years, Sean Carter, Jigga, Jay-Z himself, stepped to the mic and dropped a freestyle that took aim at Drake, Kanye West, Nicki Minaj, Dame Dash, and reportedly a few others. Now, everybody's talking. But the conversation people are having? It's missing the most important part of this story. Stay with me. Let's start with what Drake actually said. Because some people are acting like this came out of nowhere, like HOV just woke up one morning and decided to go off.
Nah.
Drake built a whole case on that album. 3 tracks, multiple bars, a full indictment. Let me walk you through it. On Janice SDFU, released May 15th, 2026, Drake rapped, "You boys got big on my name. That's big enough. We know how you OGs rocking already, my NA. The jig is up." Now listen, that line does a lot of work. The phrase, "the jig is up," jig, as in Jigga, as in Jay-Z's own nickname. Drake wasn't just saying the game is over. He was naming the person directly and calling out the entire dynamic where veteran artists built their late-career cultural relevance by proximity to Drake's name. And his point? We already know the play. We've seen it. It's old. We're done pretending it's impressive. Yo, when I first caught that bar, I had to rewind it twice. Because on the surface it sounds casual, and then it hits you that it's surgical. Then on Whisper My Name, same May 15th release, Drake went even more direct. "I'll take 500K, not the dinner. I never could learn SHD from none of y'all." Now, for context on why this one hits different, there's been a debate floating around social media for years. Would you take $500,000 cash or a dinner with Jay-Z? The whole premise being that Jay-Z's mentorship, his network, his wisdom is worth more than $500,000. Jay-Z himself weighed in on that debate and said take the money. He even admitted he ain't worth the cash. But Drake? He didn't just say he'd take the money. He said he couldn't learn anything from these people at all. That's not a diss at Jay-Z's net worth. That's a diss at his relevance as a mentor. That's calling the emperor's clothes a fit he never actually wore. And then on Make Them Pay, Drake landed the sharpest shot. "UNS run and talk to HOV for a second opinion. Me, I stood 10 TS and accepted the mission." He's drawing a direct line. Other rappers in the industry, when the pressure came during the Kendrick beef, ran to Jay-Z for advice, for cosign, for permission. Drake says he didn't do that. He stood his ground alone. Whether you believe that or not, the implication about everyone else running to HOV is cold. Real talk. That bar has layers I don't think people fully unwrapped when the album first dropped.
Now.
That was Drake's opening argument. Here's what HOV came back with. On May 30th, 2026, at the Roots Picnic in Philadelphia, Jay-Z freestyled, My next update, the jig is up, and I'm up 10. Wrong chart. Champ, you gotta look up again. NS looked up to HOV. I never looked up to them. He followed that with, the crackers got your publishing. Gangster. Go talk tough to them. Don't talk success to me. UNS's workers. In perpetuity is how your contract is worded. Okay. I need to stop here because when I heard this, I was genuinely like, wait, is this the best he's got? The publishing shot is real, and we'll get into the contract angle later, but wrong chart, champ, and I'm up 10? He's telling Drake to look at the Forbes list, not the Billboard chart. The Billionaire flex. As a rebuttal to an artist who just broke Jay-Z's own Billboard record with his 15th #1 album.
Man.
That's a bit like losing a sprint and saying, yeah, but I own the track. He also rapped, allegedly aimed at Nicki Minaj. That lady back on the stuff. She sound like she in love with him. Her kid can't even take their kids, enough of them. That's a layered shot, reportedly accusing Nicki of being back on substances, questioning her as a mother, and dragging her child's situation into it. On a public stage. In 2026. We'll come back to why that's particularly ironic. And aimed reportedly at Kanye West or Dame Dash J rapped. You ever heard of Wonderkin? My children are some of them. Have UNS no shame? You really want to get under my skin? I'll really get under your skin. Ask Un how I'm playing. That last line, ask Un how I'm playing, is a reference to Lance Rivera, the music executive who was allegedly stabbed at Q-Tip's album release party at the Kit Kat Club in New York City on December 2nd, 1999. Jay-Z was arrested, pled guilty to third-degree assault, and received 3 years probation. On stage in 2026, at age 56, in what was supposedly a victory lap concert, HOV is apparently claiming credit for getting under someone's skin. Literally. We'll zoom in on that particular moment very shortly, because there's a lot more to that story than meets the eye. Now here's what nobody's connecting. And I mean nobody. Because when you lay out the timeline of this whole thing, the story changes completely. Let's go back to March 2026. Just a few months before Drake dropped ICEMAN, Jay-Z gave his first GQ cover interview in nearly a decade. Big event. Rare moment of visibility from a guy who's mostly been operating in the background. And in that interview, he was asked about the Drake-Kendrick beef. His response, and I'm paraphrasing here because I won't reproduce the exact wording, was essentially that he wasn't sure battling even needed to be part of the hip-hop culture anymore. He talked about how it had all gone too far. How bringing people's kids into it was wrong. How the culture had outgrown it. He even framed it as a kind of elder wisdom. I sound like the old guy wagging his finger, he admitted in that interview, but I think we can achieve the same thing through collaboration. That was March 2026. He also said something interesting in that same interview when asked about Kendrick headlining the Super Bowl, which Roc Nation played a role in selecting. He essentially said he picked Kendrick because Kendrick was having a monster year, not because of any alliance against Drake. Not just me. They drag everybody in there like everyone's part of this conspiracy to undermine Drake. Like what? I'm effing HOV. That's his framing. He's above the beef. Then May 15th, 2026, Drake drops ICEMAN. 3 albums. Historic. 15 #1 albums, breaking Jay-Z's own record for most #1 Billboard 200 albums by a solo male artist. Y'all didn't catch that part, did you? Drake didn't just take shots at HOV on the record. He went and took his record. The Billboard record that Jay-Z had held, the one that defined his commercial legacy alongside the Biggie, the Tupac comparisons, Drake took it and kept it moving. 15 #1s, tying Taylor Swift, sitting second only to the Beatles all time. That's not rap. That's erasure. So here's what we know happened in the 2 weeks between May 15th and May 30th. Jay-Z heard the album. Jay-Z saw his chart record fall. Jay-Z watched Drake debut all 3 albums in the top 3 slots on the Billboard 200 simultaneously, something that literally had never been done in the chart's history since 1956. And then Jay-Z, who 2 months prior told GQ that he wasn't sure rap beef was even worth having anymore, got up on stage at the Roots Picnic in Philadelphia, his first solo show in 6 years, and freestyled at everybody who'd been talking. That timing tells you everything. This was not planned wisdom. This was a reaction. The album got under his skin, the record-breaking got under his skin, and the Roots Picnic was the pressure valve releasing. And here's what makes that even more revealing. Drake had already proven the point before HOV even opened his mouth. Now, let's zoom in. Because there are specific details in this freestyle that are getting glossed over, and they reveal a lot more than the surface read. First, the publishing shot. Them crackers got your publishing. Gangster. Go talk tough to them. This is real. Drake's situation with his label, the universal lawsuit he filed and is still fighting, the control over his masters. It's a genuine vulnerability. Jay-Z built much of his legacy on owning his masters. Rock Nation. Title. The whole business empire angle. So the shot lands on paper. But here's what nobody's pointing out. Drake is 39 years old. Jay-Z didn't even start Rock Nation until he was in his 40s. The contract situation Drake is navigating right now is something Jay himself was stuck in during the early years at Def Jam. So what HOV is basically doing is using Drake's current situation to imply Drake will never get there, but Jay's own history says the opposite. That line about workers in perpetuity reads more like projection than prosecution. Second, and this is the one that stopped me cold. Ask on how I'm playing. Let's talk about what's actually going on with this line. On December 2nd, 1999, Jay-Z pled guilty to third-degree assault in connection with a stabbing at Q-Tip's album release party at the Kit Kat Club in New York City. The alleged victim was Lance Rivera, a music executive. Jay-Z received 3 years probation. For years, the official story was that Jay was responsible. But in May 2023, Rivera himself went on DJ Vlad and said, clearly and on record, that Jay-Z was not the guy who actually stabbed him. Rivera said he was surrounded by multiple people with weapons that night, got stabbed by someone, but that someone was not Jay-Z. He said, if Jay-Z had stabbed me, y'all wouldn't have gotten the Black Album. Rivera was clear. So here we have Jay-Z, in 2026, on stage at a major festival, apparently claiming credit for a stabbing that the actual victim cleared him of 23 years after the fact. I had to think about that for a while, because either Jay is clowning on the idea, or he genuinely believes the street credibility of claiming it outweighs the reality of the situation. Either way, that's a wild choice of bar for a man who 3 months ago was telling GQ that beef culture had gotten too extreme. Third, the Nicki line. Her kid can't even take their kids, enough of them. Regardless of what this actually means, let's hold it next to the GQ interview where Jay said, and I'm paraphrasing, it's too far. It's bringing people's kids in it. That was March 2026. This is May 2026. He brought Nicki Minaj's child situation into a freestyle on a public stage. That's not a subliminal. That's a direct reference to Nicki's son. And Jay said explicitly that he didn't like when people did that. He said it twice in the GQ interview. This is an interpretation. The receipts are right there. Fourth, wrong chart champ. This one is doing a lot of heavy lifting in Jay's favor online, and I want to be honest, it's actually a decent flip. He's saying Drake is comparing them on the Billboard chart, but the real scoreboard is the Forbes list. Jay's net worth is estimated around $2 to $2.5 billion. Drake's, depending on the source, is reportedly in the billionaire range as well, but less public. So the Forbes flex isn't nothing. But here's what makes it hollow. Drake just broke Jay-Z's Billboard record. That's not Drake's chart. That was Jay-Z's chart. Jay's name was literally on it. Wrong chart is a deflection from the fact that Drake walked into HOV's own house and took something off the wall. Now, let's talk about how the media is framing this, because the spin is all over the place. Complex and hot new hip-hop are treating this as a legitimate clapback, a veteran asserting authority, reminding Drake who built this thing. The framing is essentially, Jay showed up, he still got it, end of story. And look, I understand why outlets go that direction. Jay-Z performing for the first time in 6 years, freestyling, going at multiple people at once. That's a spectacle. The crowd was there. The energy was real. The Roots Picnic is a legitimate institution. And Jay still has bars. I'm not going to sit here and lie. Wrong chart, champ is a clean line. He's 56, he's been mostly quiet, and he came out sharp enough. If you're grading on a curve, and the internet absolutely is, it looks like a win. Consequence of Sound and Vice took a more skeptical angle, specifically highlighting the hypocrisy of Jay's prior GQ comments versus what happened at the Roots picnic. Consequence literally wrote, "Turns out preaching peace is a lot easier than practicing it." That's the honest take. That's the read that holds up when you look at the timeline. Now, some people in the Jay-Z corner are saying the GQ comments were about the Kendrick-Drake beef specifically, and what Jay did at Roots picnic was different. It was his own beef, his own response, not someone else's war. And look, I can see that argument. I can see why someone would draw that line. But here's why it falls apart. In that same GQ interview, Jay specifically said bringing people's kids into it was wrong. He said it with emphasis. And then he did exactly that to Nicki Minaj's kid, on stage, in front of a crowd. That's not about whose beef it is. That's about what he said the line was, and then crossing it himself. Some Jay-Z fans online are doing gymnastics to avoid that.
The receipts don't bend that way.
The Drizzy subreddit, predictably, went wild, pointing out that Jay-Z pulled off an a cappella freestyle rather than releasing an actual diss track, called Drake a rapper while simultaneously rapping in response to him, and that rapper can't be my op is a strange thing to say when you're literally doing a rap freestyle in response to rap lyrics. Some people are calling it the most expensive reach in hip-hop history, a billionaire spending goodwill on an unforced reaction. But here's what nobody, and I mean nobody, is talking about yet.
All right.
Here's where I say what the blogs won't, what the corporate takes won't, what the people still trying to have access to Jay-Z's camp definitely won't. The mainstream narrative is Jay-Z responded, he still has it, the culture got a moment, this is great for hip-hop. The counter-narrative from the Drake side is, it was weak, no beat, no track, just a freestyle, and Drake will smoke him. Both of those conversations are missing the actual story. Here's what I think is really happening. Jay-Z's response at the Roots picnic was not a win. It was a tell. And specifically, it was the tell of a man who has spent years carefully constructing the image of the unbothered mogul, the billionaire above the fray, the elder statesman who doesn't need to respond. And Drake, in 2 weeks, with 3 albums and a handful of bars, got all of that to collapse in real time. Think about what it actually took to get Jay-Z out of that suit. Drake broke his Billboard record. Drake dismissed the value of his mentorship publicly. Drake implied that the other rappers in the industry who ran to Jay for a second opinion were weak for doing so. And the response was, Jay got on stage and freestyled about it. Not an album. Not a produced track. Not a calculated strategic move. A freestyle. At a festival he was already booked for. In his first solo show in 6 years. This is the historical pattern at work, and it's one that has played out before. When an artist who built their identity on being untouchable gets actually touched, there are 2 moves: stay silent and let the narrative fade, or respond and risk confirming the wound. Jay chose to respond. And by doing so, he confirmed the wound. He confirmed that the ICEMAN diss landed. He confirmed that the jig is up got to him. He confirmed that watching Drake break his Billboard record in real time, with 3 albums simultaneously, hit different. Because if it didn't bother him, and he's the one who said he doesn't know if battling needs to be part of the culture, then what was the Roots picnic freestyle? And here's the layer underneath that layer. Drake's publishing line, "Them crackers got your publishing," is positioned as HOV exposing a weakness. But what that line actually does is reveal Jay's own anxiety. Because Jay built his entire post-rap legacy on the business.
Title:
Rock Nation. The Billionaire brand. The whole thing is predicated on him being smarter than the music industry, owning what other artists lost. And Drake, at 39, is in the middle of a label dispute and actively fighting for that same ownership. Jay is essentially arguing that Drake's present proves Drake will always be a worker. But what it actually shows is that Jay is scared of the version of Drake that comes out the other side of that fight. Because if Drake wins that legal battle with Universal, builds full ownership of his catalog, and still dominates the charts with 15 #1 albums, the billionaire mogul narrative stops being Jay's exclusive. And at that point, wrong chart, champ becomes the most ironic thing HOV ever said. The real story here isn't beef. It's succession. Drake is not just challenging Jay-Z's legacy in hip-hop. He's challenging the specific version of legacy Jay invented, The business-focused, above the fray, elder statesman who doesn't need to prove himself brand of influence. And the Roots Picnic Freestyle is proof that Jay felt that challenge. Because the unbothered mogul doesn't get on stage and freestyle about the guy who dissed him 2 weeks ago on his album. The unbothered mogul keeps the suit on. Jay took the suit off. And that is the truth they won't put on the news. Alright, so where does this go from here? Let me tell you exactly what I think is coming. Scenario 1, and this is the most likely. Drake doesn't drop a dedicated diss track in response to the Roots Picnic Freestyle. He doesn't have to. He already went first on the album, broke Jay's records, got the reaction he was looking for, and now he can let the internet do the rest. The silence from Drake at this point is its own kind of response. And every day that goes by without a dedicated Jay-Z diss track is going to make the Roots Picnic Freestyle look more reactive and less calculated. When Drake inevitably does his next media moment, album, interview, live stream, and somebody asks him about Jay-Z's response, watch how unbothered he's going to sound. That contrast is going to be devastating. The guy who said he doesn't like beef being the one who couldn't stay quiet, and Drake being the one who can. Mark my words, that's the irony that's going to define this chapter. Scenario 2. Jay drops actual music. A produced track, a beat, something you can put on a playlist. This is the only move that actually changes the power dynamic. Because right now, the freestyle lives on social media in shaky vertical video clips. It's already starting to feel like a moment rather than a movement. If Jay drops a real record, something with genuine production, a full verse, the kind of thing that charted, then this becomes a real conversation. But here's the issue. Jay told GQ in March 2026 that the music he's recorded feels too heavy to release, that he's struggling to put out something that's a true representation of how I feel. If that's the state of his creative process, a reactive diss track isn't going to be the one that changes it. And if he does drop something quickly just to respond to Drake, the culture is going to feel that rushed energy. HOV's whole thing has been deliberate, patient, intentional music. A reactionary diss destroys that brand in one move. Drake wins from any direction on this one. Scenario 3, 5 years from now, this moment gets remembered as a turning point. Not a beef. Not a moment of HOV asserting dominance. But the moment when Jay-Z's carefully constructed elder statesman positioning came apart in real time, caught on iPhone video, uploaded to X and TikTok in 48 hours. Because here's the thing, Jay-Z's relevance for the last decade hasn't been about new music. It's been about the brand. The mogul.
The businessman.
The guy who's too big to engage. The Roots Picnic Freestyle cracked that. It showed that Drake can get to him. And once people know you can get to somebody, they're going to keep trying. The culture doesn't forget a tell. 5 years from now, people are going to point to this weekend as the moment the Untouchable myth started showing its seams. And Drake will still be releasing albums. Still breaking records. Still right there. Whatever happens next, one thing is already decided. Jay-Z handed Drake exactly the proof of concept Drake needed. And he did it on his own stage. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed uncovering the real story, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss when we expose what everyone else is too scared to say. Ring that bell for notifications. And if you want more truth bombs like this, click on one of these videos next. Trust me, you'll want to see what we found.